what is it that wakes you up on that morning?
I was awoken that morning to my sister-in-law, Jen, had burst into my room.
And do you know about what time that was?
It was early in the morning, between 6 and 6:30, I would say.
And fair to say that's not a normal occurrence?
No.
And when she burst into your room, can you describe her demeanor or sort of how she appeared when she first came?
She was very upset, almost hysterical.
And what, if anything, did she say when she came in?
She said something to the effect, John is dead.
Objection.
Next question, please, Sustained.
Did you know who she was referring to when she initially comes into your room?
I initially did not.
And at some point during the course of that conversation, does Ms. McCabe make reference to going downstairs?
Yes.
And prior to that, not the content of the conversation, but as far as the length of the conversation, about how long was that length of the conversation that occurred in your bedroom between yourself, Ms. McCabe, and your wife?
Probably a minute.
And the demeanor that you described as far as Ms. McCabe was concerned is almost hysterical. Was that continuous throughout that initial conversation?
Yes. She was very upset.
And who, if anyone, did she indicate was downstairs, or why did you go downstairs?
She said that the police.
This I'm going to allow in with that foundation.
Go ahead.
She said that the police were downstairs.
And so you went downstairs to talk to the police?
Yes.
And when you go downstairs, what do you see when you get to sort of the bottom of the stairs?
I saw a Canton police officer downstairs.
So inside your house at that point?
Yes.
And the door to your house, was it still open or shut or something?
I don't remember.
And the Canton police officer that's inside your home, did you recognize him?
Yes.
And who did you recognize him?
Last name, Lank. So Officer Lank.
Was he someone that you were familiar with?
I knew who he was, yes.
Did you socialize or were you friends or anything like that?
I didn't socialize with him. I knew him to be a Canton police officer. I had met him, multiple times, and I knew him to know my brother Chris.
And so knew him is essentially what I'm asking, knew him in a professional capacity, personal capacity, or a little bit of both?
I would say more of a professional capacity, and I knew of him, but did not hang out with him socially.
And initially, when you first see Officer Lang, is he by himself, or who, if any, other officers are with him?
I believe initially he was by himself.
Then another officer joined yourself and Officer Lang at some point?
Yes, I believe another officer came into the house.
You know who that officer is?
I don't.
And as far as them coming into your house, they were welcome in your house? You didn't say get out or close the door or anything like that?
No, of course they were welcome in my house.
And where did you go with the officer sort of in your house? Where did you spoke with the officer, I'm presuming?
Yes, we spoke in the kitchen area.
And when you're speaking with the officer in the kitchen area, who is there?
So my wife, Nicole, her sister, Jen, and I believe Jen's husband, Matt, arrived almost the same time that I came downstairs, maybe a minute after.
And how long a period of time was this conversation that occurred in the kitchen?
I don't remember the exact time. I wouldn't want to guess. I don't remember. He was 10, 15, 20 minutes maybe initially.
And when you say initially, was there a subsequent conversation that occurred after that?
Yes. The Officer Lank returned to the house sometime after that.
And when he returned sometime after that, was he alone or was there another officer?
I believe that time he was with Lieutenant Gallagher, perhaps.
And were you familiar with Lieutenant Gallagher prior to that morning?
I knew who Lieutenant Gallagher was on a professional level. I had not hung out with him on a social level.
And again, they were welcomed into your home and you spoke with them, is that correct?
Yes, the second time they were there, they were invited back to the house via a phone call.
And that second conversation within your house, where did that?
Same area, family room, kitchen area.
And if you know about how long a period of conversation was that second come back to the house?
That may have been longer, maybe a half hour.
Now, going back to sort of that initial conversation, as far as, so it's yourself, it's Mr. and Mrs. McCabe, your wife, and then the police, is that correct?
Myself, my wife Nicole, my sister-in-law Jen, her husband Matt had arrived, and the police, yes.
And in between that first speaking with the police and the second time that the police came back to your house, who, if anyone, did you call or notify in regard to the situation that was going on in front of your house?
I called Brian Higgins
Why did you call Brian?
because I think it was important for him to know what was going on and that what had happened.
And as far as you knew with reference to Mr. O'Keefe and Ms. Reed, what, if any, relationship, friendship, anything were you aware of between Mr. Higgins and either Mr. O'Keefe or Mr.
I was not aware too much about a relationship with Brian and either person. Brian had mentioned maybe even that night that he was friendly and knew John. I knew of no relationship between Brian and the defendant.
And following your conversation with Mr. Higgins, who, if anyone else, came over your house?
So Brian Higgins eventually came over to my house, and my sister-in-law Julie also arrived at my house.
And do you know why your sister-in-law Julie came by your house?
Yes.
And why was that?
So she has a routine that when it's someone's birthday, she likes to come by and bring like coffee and donuts. So it was Brian's birthday that night. So my sister-in-law Julie was coming by to drop off some donuts and coffee, I think.
And where was Julie when you first saw her that morning?
She was out front in the driveway.
And what, if anything, did you ask Julie to do when you saw her out in the driveway?
I asked her to come inside.
And when she came inside, is that when you informed her of what had happened?
Yes. I don't know if it was necessarily me that informed her, but people that were there were explaining to her what happened. It was a very, very chaotic, unbelievably chaotic morning.
And as far as when that was described to your sister-in-law Julie, how would you describe sort of her demeanor or her reaction to the news regarding Mr. O'Keefe?
Shock. That's how I would describe it. Everybody's reaction that morning was utter shock. And she was upset and looked very, very in shock.
And so the second time that the Canton police officers come back to your home, who was there at that point?
I know I was there for sure. My wife, Nicole, Jen, her husband, Matt. Brian Higgins may have been there at that time. And I'm not sure about Julie. Julie at one point left the house, and I think she came back later in the morning, so I'm not sure if she was there.
And at some point when your sister-in-law Julie came back to your house, who, if anyone, came to your house with her?
Her husband, my brother Chris, who's her husband.
Was this before or after the second time that the police had been at your house?
I believe they came back after the second time, but I'm not 100% sure. The first time that Julie came with the coffee, the police were not there.